My name is Samuel A. Green, and I say that because everybody around may call me S.A. Green, but that's my full name. And I was born July the 8th, 1925. My mother told me it was right around 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was born in Georgetown, South Carolina. I grew up, I would say, on Frazier Street. They call it North Frazier Street. That street is not there now. Since all the business came in out in the Walmart area, it stopped right at each end of it. And Frazier Street goes straight on out on Walmart, out in that area. And they give the street that I live on Bond Street. And I was living there all of my life when I'm not in another state somewhere. And I went to Howard Elementary School. I graduated in 1945. We went as far as the 10th grade, not the 11th, 1945. And when I graduated, came home, I was so nice and happy about it. My mother was sitting on the porch with a letter in her hand and tears running down her eyes. And I running out of her eyes, rather. And I asked her, "What's wrong?" And she handed me a letter. And that was a letter from the draft board. I was 18 years old at that time to go into the military. And sure enough, I followed the discretion on it, or everything they had on it. Went down to the old post office here in Georgetown and caught the bus. I cannot tell you the date, but I caught the bus, and they took about 5 of us from Georgetown to Columbia, South Carolina, to be examined. And I was examined, and I passed all of the tests they gave to me. And it was a time that you couldn't come back home at that time. You go straight out to camp, training camp. Leaving Columbia, we went on a bus to Great Lakes, Illinois, where the boot camp was for us to take our training in. And I think it was about right around 3 or 4 weeks. We were there in training, and it was kind of cold because it was in October at that time. And it was real cold. And they asked, one officer passed by and wanted to know, they needed 10 men, 10 young men to work in the post office. And after I was still in training, but it was cold and whatnot, and so they gave me a job in the post office, sorting out mails, send them to different places, you know. And I worked in the post office for about a month. And after working in the post office was over, I went back to boot camp. And from boot camp, they had a lake out there as well. And they had rowboats. They put 8 young men in the rowboat, 4 on each side. And in that cold weather on that lake, we were rowing ourselves, breaking ice in that water. And we were trained enough to know when to stop and when to come back in. We had a special time to come back in. And after that training, we went back to our barracks. And they gave us a week off to get ourselves together and rest up a little bit. Because on the outside, just to drill and take training on the outside, it was too much ice and cold and what have you. And after finishing boot camp, a number of us were called to go out to California in combat training since the war was going on, and we had to climb up, climb down, crawl under, and everything. We did some rough work in that training out in California. Of course, the weather was all right. And after finished training in California, right in, I think it was San Diego, when we got boated on a ship. That ship was the USS Momac Hawk. That ship was out of commission right now because they were trying to find that ship so we could talk about it a little more. And that ship took us into New York. It was a transport ship. And I believe they took on pretty close 200 young and ageable young men. And we left New York and we went out through the European theater out into the ocean, and we traveled from there to all the way. Now there's a place, I can't exactly call that name, that where one day, 1 week is, that's the morning, and when you, the equator, we crossed the equator. And we crossed the equator, it was dark, but when we got on the other side of it, it was daylight. And they gave us a party on the ship. We got initiated on the ship by crossing the equator. And we went from there, I remember very well, into a place you call Tulagi. I think I have it here because my, my this is my discharge paper, and a lot of things happen is not on this discharge paper like they have on others, but it's Talogi Island, and our base, the men that's they shipped out from California, they gave us, I think it was about pretty close 50 of it, because it was a base company, they call it when we got overseas, base company #1. And base company #1, we went on new ground. The ground was bombed, and you could find old helmets and old clothes, bones and what have you. And our job was to clean up that island at that time. And they were building barracks on it. And that was our job for a long time. But however, they had a place they called the motor pool. That's the small boats with motor and gasoline. The big ship comes out, they have to stop. They can't just bring the people on in. And at the motor pool, I was working at the motor pool with the boat. When we get a call to go out, they'll tell us how many is coming in and pick the men up or whoever and bring them into the island. And I stay on Guadalcanal. They called, I think I stayed there over a year. It was over a year. I stayed in that area almost before peace was declared, which was in 1945. I stayed there. And after peace was declared, we had an opportunity to leave the island and join the reserve. And some of us could go back home if we wanted to, and some could stay in the reserve. And what I did, because after I finished school, I wanted to, God had called me to preach, and that's what I wanted to do. So I joined the reserve, and I came out and went to college. The first college I went to was A&T. It was a college at that time. It's a university now. In Greensboro, North Carolina, under the GI Bill of Rights. They paid my way to go there. And I left that what I took while I was there, business administration. I left there and I went to Morris College, Theological Seminary. And that's when I did my work I wanted to be a preacher. And I got a BTA degree, some degree they give me to bring all that stuff, but I didn't. I graduated from Morris College, and after leaving Morris College, before I was leaving Morris College, they had given me 2 churches. One had 2 Sundays, the other one had 1 Sunday to pastor, and I started pastoring from that day. I think it's around 50, close 60 years I was pastoring, and I was not called back into the military anymore. And I pastored for about pretty close 60 some odd years. And during those years, I pastored 4 churches. They were just, you know, one at a time for that many years. The oldest one that I pastored is on Sandy Island, and that church was rebuilt by me as leader as well. And I pastored that one for 27 years. And one in Horry County, St. Elizabeth Baptist Church. I built that one for the members because the old one was no good. And I pastored that one about 20 years. And I came back into, there was a village leaving here, you call it Plantersville, into that area. I was called in that area in a small church, but they enlarged it under my leadership. And I stayed there, I can't remember how many years, but I stayed there for quite a while. And the last church I pastored, because I was in, when I stepped down from pastoring, I was 90 years old. And that one is in Williamsburg County, Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church, and I pastored that one for pretty close 21 years. And after stepping down, I did not stop preaching because at some of the churches that I pastored, the older folks wanted me to come, and if they was to pass away, and took care of their funerals for them, and I did all that. And the last person I went and preached and served them, that family was on Sandy Island. This lady was 107 years old, and the daughter wanted me to come. You remember, Reverend Green, that Mama wanted you to take care of her funeral? And that's when but I haven't pastored too many of them because I'm old myself. And I just want to just give it up and relax. But I still read my Bible, and people still call on me for little things, not the large things anymore. And I'm still going to my home church. My home church is right here in Georgetown, but Thursday Missionary Baptist Church, right, it's a block away from the White Baptist Church. And I was in that church from a little baby. My mother told me how she would take a blanket with her to church and how she would keep it around me and herself and so forth and so on. And I grew up in that church. And today I'm still a member of that church. But if anybody want me to do something or not preaching now and help them in some of the biblical works and stuff like that, I would do that to them as well. And I'm just taking life easy at home because the 8th of next month, July the 8th, I'll be 97 years old, and I just want to take care of myself, you know. And getting back a little to the war, I've helped a lot of young men who wanted to go in and what they had to do, especially the one that finished school. If they said they want to go in and made any days or any years in the military, they could go in under the GI Bill of Rights, you know, and the government would help them. And I'm still helping them today because a lot want to go in because a lot of old ones are still out and could help them. And if you want to go in and stay a while and you don't have any money to go to college, nobody to help you, the government will send you to college and there's some in right now that I've given the opportunity to work with them getting in. And I said, now you can't just go in and stay in a year. You got to make up the time because they're going to pay your way to college. And they did. And that is a good part of what I would do, help the others. Now I have 5 of us was in the military. I'm the oldest one. I have one brother, he passed away. He is John Green. He did 6.5 years, and he was a part of a ship, working on a ship because he finished that school, the school that I went to, the college in Greensboro, A&T, and he took up engineer there. And he was able to get that job on that ship. And after he got old and his health got kind of bad, he came out with all those years and everything. But he passed away. He passed away about 6 or 7 years now, right from Georgetown. But life with, let me say this. I have a brother lives in Florida, Orlando, Florida. He finished with a lot of years. He's out. He was in the Air Force, and he had some broken legs, but his leg was already worked on good, and he is still living and doing well. His name is Moses Green, Dr. Moses Green. And the next one, he is Engel Green. He named after the father, Junior. He did a lot of years in the service. And John is the one died. I'm living. Moses is living. Engel is living. Henry, if you remember a funeral home here, that funeral home is out of business now. He was in the military, Henry Green, and he came out, start embalming at the funeral home right across from Bethesda on the corner. But that funeral is out of business. I think McKnight and that funeral home had joined in together. And the rest, 5 of us, we are living. And my sisters, there were 8 sisters. And all of them went home except 2. And those 2, one of them lives in Greensboro and the other one lives in Florida. We traveled from Guadalcanal on up to the Hawaiian Island. That's when I met the governor. I think it was Roosevelt was governor during the time of, if you have a phone, you could pull it up on the phone and see that. Roosevelt was the time when peace was declared, was on the ship up in the Hawaiian Island, and he got aboard that ship. And he spoke to all of us about billing the, place we go to if we are sick, like the they built one in Charleston, one in Columbia, but they got them built all the way around now. The one in Charleston, I think that's about the oldest one, where we could go for medicine and be served by doctors, get glasses, or if you need to have your dental work done, hearing aids and all that, the government would give it to us. I know they give it to me, you know. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Until you get out of a part, you go in different places because we had to dig foxholes, had our little shovel to dig foxholes, and we had to dig it real deep and sort of like ants, how ants make a nest. You dig it a certain ways down and a certain ways large enough to put a mattress or a bed or a straw to when you go in that foxhole, you could sleep, find a place to sleep. And I'll never forget, there were two fellas came by and they started down in the foxhole, and it was two of us in the foxhole, and they wanted to know, we wanted to know where they going, you know. They got to get away from there and dig their own foxhole. And if you don't keep up with it, somebody else will get in and cover it up. You can't get back in. But that's what we had most of the time because the places out in that area where we were was very dangerous. And you had what you called snipers in that area as well. The place was not that clean. You got to watch where you go. We had leaders who would take us way to work and stuff like that, but somebody had to watch around you. A sniper could come through there and kill you, you know. But I don't remember any of them uh, in Base Company 1 got killed on that island long as I was there. Even when peace was declared in 45, I don't know of any of our men got killed. We all had the privilege of coming back, getting away from there, and join the reserve and so forth. And a lot who have joined the reserve went back in because there was another war followed World War II. And now I could have gone back in one or two of them, but no. I had finished my war work, that kind of work, and I was in the ministry for the rest of those years. I had gotten married, 3 children. I think I have my son in my pocket on a piece of picture because he said, "Daddy, I'm going to be like you. I'm going in the military." And he went in the military, but in 2016, that's when he passed away because he was in an air crash. He was in the Air Force too. He was out in the hills of California, and I think it was cloudy and raining when they had that crash. And none of those boys got saved. And I'll take time in a few minutes when we take a break, and I'm pretty sure I have him I'll show him to you. And that was the only boy in my family. The rest was 2 girls. If I would write a letter, if somebody would get hurt by me or get killed by me, and I write in that letter and send it to the house because they told us not to do it, they'll censor all of that out, you know. And, I had got kind of, since I came out, I got kind of sort of scary about telling people about who I know got killed over there, and what happened to the body. But during wartime, they would never ship a body out to the home. But after wartime, they would ship a body out, but it'll be 2 officers with that body. And the reason they are with that body, sometimes it's just be the weight of that body in that casket. But they got to be with it, especially at night and during the day, whatever funeral home it's, so nobody could open because it can't open. Yes. Well, the girl that I married was living right next door to where I'm living now, and her mother was living. She was Ruth Swinton Green, and we were married for 20 years because in 1971 there were dual lanes from Georgetown to Charleston, and that's going and coming. They weren't the full lanes. And my oldest daughter was in going to college rather, and she went over to Charleston to get her some luggage and some clothes and whatnot because I remember giving her my card. And on the way out of Charleston, on the way back, and this happened a day after the 4th of July. It was in July when it happened. There were two guys racing on the lane going south. One on one side and the other one on the road coming out of Charleston. That was my wife. And ditches were on both sides of the road. Nothing but water was in it. And she tried to get the car off enough, but she couldn't. And he just hit her in the front with that fast speed. And what the doctor told me that why both arms were broken, she was holding the wheel too tight, and she should have relaxed and relax her back as well because there weren't no seatbelt in those cars at that time. And said she would have been living today. But by holding that wheel tight, she got broken arms and broken neck. And my daughter, the door just came open and she fell out in all that water. And her head was skinned like a rabbit. And they rushed her to the hospital in Charleston. And I was on Sandy Island when that happened. And the patrolman came down to the water, and I was at the church. The boat brought him up across the river, and he got to the church, and he called me, "Are you Reverend Green?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, he said, "You're driving?" I said, "Yes." I had a car parked on the landing on the outside. And he asked me, did I have enough gas in it to go to Charleston? But he didn't tell me what happened. He said, your wife was in an accident, but all is well. Don't worry about anything. He said, I want you to follow me into Charleston. And the bridge was 2 lanes as well, and they had a little house down there. You had to pay to go across that bridge at that time, you know. And he drove like 90 and 95, but the patrolman had the highway cleared from Georgetown till we crossed that bridge and led me on up to the hospital. And he got out, he walked with me to the hospital, and the first person we saw was a nurse standing at the door. And I went in, and the doctor came and met me as well. And the patrolman talked with the doctor and myself and said, he hoped I have a lovely trip going back, safe trip going back. He said, what I want you to do now, try to come back. If not, we'll call you and see how your daughter is doing. But if anything else, you will get some more information on it. So when I drove up to the house where I live, Well, not the one I live in. It was an older house. Uh, the noise was on. A lot of people was out. It was on the news. Everything was on the news. And they were listening to the radio news. I don't believe it was TV out at that time, you know? And they was out and they ran to my car when I drove up. Instead of me just going on in the house, and they are asking me about the wreck. And they knew that my wife had passed away. And then I went on in and I sat down and they came in and started patting me on the shoulder. And I don't know. I just, after I found out what she had passed and everywhere, and people were just coming and talking to me about it and stuff like that. And I have a picture of her at the house with the kids around her, and she's standing up in the back. But it hurt me for a while. I just couldn't talk too much about it. But I think she passed away. If she was living today, and we got married in 1950. 1950, and it was on a Christmas Day. It was in December. I'll never forget that. And I think you could figure that out if she was living from 1950 up to today. How many years that would have been if we were still together. I said that my two daughters were living at that time. They came down and they gave me an appreciation in Bethesda Missionary Baptist Church. All of the people from the churches I pastored came to it, and the members and whatnot, a good crowd there. And I enjoyed that because my daughters, they talked and whatnot, told the folks about who I was and what I was doing for them and so forth. But life my life was a good life.